There is a place on Earth where the air is so thin that your lungs burn with every breath, where the sky presses down with a weight you can feel in your bones, and where the ruins of an impossible civilization lie scattered across a frozen plateau. That place is Bolivia, and what remains there should not exist. I need you to understand something before we begin this journey together. I have spent more than 3 decades of my life chasing mysteries across this planet. I have crawled through Egyptian tombs with sand in my teeth. I have descended into Mayan cenotes where the darkness swallows your flashlight beam. I have walked the silent corridors of Angkor Wat at dawn when the stones seem to whisper. But nothing has unsettled me quite like what I have witnessed in Bolivia. The mysteries we are about to explore are not speculation. They are not the fever dreams of conspiracy theorists or the inventions of television producers seeking ratings. They are documented facts, measured by instruments, studied by universities, published in peer-reviewed journals. And yet, when you ask the simple question, how did ancient people accomplish these things? The answers become suddenly vague. Experts who speak with confidence about other ancient sites grow quiet when Bolivia enters the conversation. Topics shift. Explanations trail off into silence. I am not suggesting cover-ups or conspiracies. What I am suggesting is something perhaps more troubling, that Bolivia holds evidence which fundamentally challenges our understanding of what ancient humans could achieve, and that this evidence makes many researchers deeply uncomfortable. Because if we are wrong about what people accomplished thousands of years ago in one of the harshest environments on Earth, what else might we be wrong about? Tonight, we journey to 4 sites that guard some of the most troubling questions in archaeology. We begin with the shattered precision of Puma Punku, where stone blocks were cut with tolerances that match modern laser technology. We descend into the freezing depths of Lake Titicaca, where drowned temples wait in darkness, suggesting civilizations far older than our textbooks acknowledge. We climb a sacred mountain that an unknown culture carved into something that still defies interpretation. And we enter an underground temple filled with stone faces that have watched in silence for 2,000 years, their meaning lost to time. These are not comfortable mysteries. They do not resolve neatly. They leave questions hanging in the thin Andean air, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable. But that is precisely why they matter. Because the past is not a closed book. It is a living conversation between what we think we know and what the evidence actually shows. Bolivia is waiting. The stones are patient. And they have much to show us. The Bolivian Altiplano stretches before you like a table prepared for giants. At an elevation of 12,800 feet above sea level, this high plateau seems to touch the sky itself. A vast, treeless expanse of yellow ichu grass rippling in winds that carry the chill of distant glaciers. The Andes rise in the distance, their peaks touched with snow that has not melted in 10,000 years. The air at this altitude contains only 60% of the oxygen found at sea level, and you feel every missing molecule with each labored breath. This is not a place where civilization should flourish. This is a place where survival itself is an achievement. And yet someone built here. Someone cut stone with impossible precision, moved blocks weighing more than 100 tons across this barren landscape, and created structures so sophisticated that engineers today struggle to explain them. That someone left their work scattered across the plateau like the aftermath of some ancient catastrophe. Welcome to Puma Punku. The site lies approximately 45 miles west of La Paz, Bolivia's administrative capital, in what was once the ceremonial heart of the Tiwanaku civilization. You approach across a landscape that reveals nothing of what awaits. The ground is flat, brown, empty. A few adobe structures dot the horizon. Llamas graze in the distance, their shapes wavering in the thin mountain air. Nothing suggests that you are approaching one of the most perplexing archaeological sites on the planet. Then, the ruins emerge from the earth, and everything changes. The Spanish conquistadors were the first Europeans to document Puma Punku, arriving in the early 16th century as they pushed south from their conquest of Peru. What they found confused them deeply. The local Aymara people told them that these ruins had always been here, that they predated even the mighty Inca Empire, which itself had no explanation for the site's origins. The Inca, who built Machu Picchu and conquered most of western South America, looked at Puma Punku and said they did not know who had created it. They believed it was built in a single night by supernatural beings. The Spanish recorded these accounts, but could offer no better explanation of their own. The precision of the stonework exceeded anything in their European experience. The scale of the blocks defied the engineering knowledge of their era. They documented what they saw and moved on, leaving the mystery for future generations. Serious archaeological investigation did not begin until the 20th century. Arthur Posnansky, a Bolivian engineer of Austrian descent, devoted decades of his life to studying Tiwanaku and Puma Punku, beginning in the 1930s. His meticulous measurements revealed something that mainstream archaeology was not prepared to accept. The precision of the stonework at Puma Punku exceeded anything that should have been possible with Bronze Age technology. Posnansky's findings were controversial in his time and remain debated today, but his core observation has been confirmed repeatedly. The stones of Puma Punku were cut with extraordinary precision. To truly understand what we are looking at, we must first imagine the world as it existed when Puma Punku was built. Modern dating places the main construction phase around 536 CE, though some researchers argue that portions of the site may be significantly older. The Tiwanaku civilization that built it flourished from approximately 300 BC until its collapse around 1000 CE, a span of over 1,000 years. At its height, Tiwanaku was a major urban center, supporting perhaps 40,000 people. This alone seems nearly impossible given the hostile environment. At nearly 13,000 feet elevation, agriculture is extraordinarily difficult. Growing seasons are short. Frost is common even in summer months. The nearest forests for timber are dozens of miles away across mountain passes. And yet the Tiwanaku not only survived here, they thrived, building monumental architecture that would endure for millennia. The climate during the Tiwanaku period was somewhat more favorable than today. Lake Titicaca, which lies just north of the site, was larger then, its waters extending closer to Tiwanaku and providing fish, waterfowl, and transportation routes. The totara reeds that grew along its shores provided building materials. But even accounting for these advantages, the accomplishments of the Tiwanaku strain credulity. They had no iron. They had no steel. They had no wheel for transportation. Their strongest draft animals were llamas, which can carry perhaps 90 pounds at most. They worked with stone tools and bronze implements. And yet, they cut volcanic rock with precision measured in fractions of millimeters and moved blocks weighing more than 130 metric tons across dozens of miles of barren plateau. Now let me describe what you actually see when you stand among the ruins of Puma Punku, because the photographs do not prepare you for the reality. The first thing you notice is that something catastrophic happened here. The site is not intact. It is a field of scattered rubble, massive blocks tumbled and broken as if some great force tore the original structures apart. Earthquakes are the standard explanation, and Bolivia is certainly seismically active. But the pattern of destruction has never been fully explained. Some blocks appear to have been moved significant distances from their original positions. Others seem deliberately defaced or dismantled. Among this rubble, shapes emerge that should not exist in an archaeological context. The H blocks of Puma Punku are perhaps the most famous examples. These rectangular stones, each weighing several tons, feature complex geometric shapes cut into their surfaces. Grooves run in perfectly straight lines. Channels meet at precise 90-degree angles. Drill holes of consistent diameter penetrate the stone at regular intervals. The blocks are designed to interlock, fitting together like three-dimensional puzzle pieces with tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. I have examined these blocks closely, running my fingers along surfaces that feel machine-made. The edges are too sharp, too consistent, too geometrically perfect to reconcile with hand tools and patience. Modern engineers who have studied the H-blocks acknowledge that replicating them with ancient technology would be extraordinarily challenging, not theoretically impossible, but certainly not explained by any demonstrated techniques. The drilling is particularly troubling. Some of the holes in the H-blocks appear to have been made by hollow drill bits of a type completely unknown in the pre-Columbian Americas. The bore marks are consistent along the entire length of each hole. The diameter remains uniform. The depth is precisely controlled. Modern analysis suggests these holes were made by rotating tubular drills, but no such tools have ever been found in the archaeological record of the region. Consider the raw numbers and what they imply. The largest blocks at Puma Punku weigh approximately 131 metric tons, roughly the weight of a fully loaded Boeing 757 aircraft. The red sandstone used in construction was quarried from a site approximately 6 miles away. The andesite, a much harder volcanic stone that makes up some of the most precisely cut pieces, was quarried from the shores of Lake Titicaca, roughly 50 miles distant. The Tiwanaku had no wheeled vehicles. They had no iron tools capable of cutting andesite efficiently. They had no animals stronger than llamas. The terrain between the quarries and the construction site is not flat. It includes ravines, river crossings, and significant elevation changes. How do you move a 131-ton block 50 miles across such terrain using Bronze Age technology? The mathematics are daunting. A block that size would require the coordinated effort of thousands of laborers pulling in unison, assuming wooden sledges and rope systems that would themselves require resources scarce on the treeless Altiplano. The logistics of feeding and coordinating such a workforce at high altitude, where agricultural surplus is limited, strain the imagination. And the transportation is actually the easier problem. How do you then cut that stone, andesite, one of the hardest volcanic rocks, to tolerances measured in tenths of millimeters? How do you achieve surfaces so flat that they deviate less than 1,000th of an inch over their entire area? How do you drill perfectly cylindrical holes using stone or bronze tools? The scientific investigation of Puma Punku has employed increasingly sophisticated technology over the decades, yet the mysteries have only deepened. Ground-penetrating radar surveys suggest that what we see on the surface represents only a fraction of what lies beneath. Additional structures, possibly intact, may wait undiscovered under the accumulated sediment of centuries. Radiocarbon dating has established a chronological framework for the site, though not without controversy. Organic materials found in association with the stone constructions consistently yield dates in the range of 500–600 C, but some researchers question whether these materials date the actual cutting of the stones or merely the final phase of construction. The stone itself cannot be directly dated by current methods. Mineralogical analysis has confirmed the quarry sources. The andesite blocks match rock formations near Lake Titicaca, with distinctive chemical signatures. The sandstone comes from quarries that have been positively identified. There is no question about where the raw materials originated. The question is how they were transported and worked. Attempts to replicate the precision cutting of Puma Punku using documented ancient techniques have yielded mixed results. While researchers have demonstrated that Bronze Age tools can cut andesite, the precision achieved falls far short of what the original builders accomplished. The gap between what we can replicate and what they actually created remains significant and largely unexplained. Competing theories about Puma Punku's construction reveal the depth of scholarly uncertainty. The conventional archaeological explanation involves large labor forces using ramps, levers, ropes, and patient abrasion to achieve the results we see. Proponents of this view point to evidence of Tiwanaku's sophisticated social organization, its ability to mobilize thousands of workers for state projects, and the long time span over which construction occurred. Given enough workers and enough time, they argue, even seemingly impossible projects become feasible. Critics of this explanation point to the precision problem. Manpower and time can move heavy objects and shape rough forms, but achieving machine-like precision over extended surfaces and complex geometries requires more than patience. It requires measurement systems accurate to fractions of millimeters, cutting techniques that produce consistent results, and quality control methods that ensure each piece fits with its neighbors. None of these technologies are documented in the Tiwanaku archaeological record. Alternative theories range from the plausible to the fantastic. Some researchers have proposed that the Tiwanaku possessed knowledge of stone softening techniques, perhaps plant-based compounds that could temporarily alter the properties of rock, making it more workable. There is no direct evidence for such techniques, but some oral traditions from the region mention them. Other researchers suggest that lost technologies, perhaps involving sound or vibration, played a role in moving and shaping stone. These theories remain speculative but highlight the inadequacy of conventional explanations. The Aymara communities who have lived in this region for centuries maintain their own traditions about Puma Punku. Their oral histories describe the site as a place of tremendous sacred power, built by beings who possessed knowledge beyond ordinary human capability. Some traditions speak of stones that could be moved by sound, lifted into place by tones and vibrations that human voices produced in concert. Other accounts describe a time before the current age of the world, when different laws governed physical reality. I want to be careful here. I am not suggesting that these traditions should be read literally or that they prove anything about ancient technology. What I am suggesting is that the people who have lived alongside these ruins for generations recognize something that modern archaeology struggles to articulate. There is something about Puma Punku that does not fit comfortably into standard narratives of human development. The mystery is not a modern invention. It is an ancient recognition that something extraordinary happened here. The Aymara relationship with Tiwanaku and Puma Punku remains spiritually significant. Ceremonies are still conducted at certain times of year. Offerings are still made. The stones are treated with reverence that transcends academic interest. For these communities, the ruins are not merely historical curiosities, they are living connections to ancestors and powers that continue to matter. Visiting Puma Punku today requires a journey to one of the more remote archaeological sites in South America. Most visitors come from La Paz, traveling by road across the Altiplano to the town of Tiwanaku. From there, Puma Punku is a short distance further, though the two sites are often treated as a single destination. The experience of being there is difficult to convey in words. The altitude affects everything. Your breathing, your thoughts, the very texture of light and shadow. The silence is profound, broken only by wind and occasionally the distant sounds of livestock. The stones lie scattered as they have for centuries, their precise edges now somewhat worn by time and weather, but still remarkably sharp. You can walk among the blocks, examining the famous 8 shapes, tracing the channels and grooves with your eyes if not your fingers. The scale becomes real in a way that photographs cannot communicate. These are not delicate artifacts. They are massive works of engineering that have survived earthquakes, abandonment, looting, and the slow grinding of time. What strikes me most about Puma Punku is not any single feature, but the totality of the achievement. Someone looked at this hostile landscape and decided to create something that would require solving problems that should have been unsolvable. They quarried stone from 50 miles away. They cut it with precision that matches modern manufacturing. They moved blocks that modern cranes would struggle with. They built structures whose original form we can only guess at. And then they disappeared. The Tiwanaku civilization collapsed around 1000 C, likely due to prolonged drought that made their high-altitude agriculture impossible. Within generations, the knowledge of how they built Puma Punku was lost. The stones remained, but the answers vanished. My own feeling is that we are looking at evidence of capabilities we do not yet understand. Not supernatural capabilities. I am not proposing magic or alien intervention. Human capabilities that have been lost, forgotten, or perhaps never properly recognized. The Tiwanaku knew things that we do not know. Their knowledge died with them, leaving only the stones as testament to what was possible. The questions that linger are the ones that matter most. What techniques did they actually use? What knowledge did they possess that left no trace in the archaeological record? And perhaps most troublingly, if we are so wrong about what ancient people could accomplish, what other assumptions about the past might need revision? The stones of Puma Punku will not answer these questions. They have kept their secrets for 1,500 years, and they show no signs of surrendering them. But they continue to ask the questions, silently, persistently, to everyone who stands among them and wonders. There is something hypnotic about water at high altitude. Lake Titicaca stretches across the border between Bolivia and Peru, its surface reflecting a sky that seems impossibly close, its depths hiding secrets that have waited millennia for discovery. At 12,507 feet above sea level, it is the highest navigable lake in the world, a vast inland sea covering more than 3,000 square miles, cradled in the Andes like an offering held up to the heavens. The lake is ancient. Geologists estimate its formation at over 3 million years ago, though its current form is much more recent, shaped by the advance and retreat of glaciers during the ice ages. For as long as humans have lived in this region, the lake has been central to their existence, providing fish, waterfowl, transportation, and spiritual sustenance. The Inca believed that the sun god Inti rose from these waters on the first day of creation. The Tiwanaku built their capital on its shores. Every culture that has flourished here has treated Titicaca as sacred, but the lake holds secrets that predate even these ancient cultures, secrets that rest in darkness, preserved by cold water, waiting. I first visited Lake Titicaca in the winter of 1998, arriving by bus from La Paz on a journey that took several hours across the Altiplano. Nothing prepares you for the scale of the lake. It appears on the horizon like an illusion, a vast blue expanse where no water should exist, surrounded by brown earth and snow-capped peaks. As you approach, the reality becomes undeniable, but no less strange. An ocean in the sky. The town of Copacabana on the Bolivian shore serves as the jumping-off point for explorations of the lake. From here, boats ferry visitors to the Isla del Sol and Isla de la Luna, islands that hold Inca ruins and spectacular views. But my interest was elsewhere, in the waters themselves, in what lay beneath. Local fishermen had spoken for centuries of structures visible beneath the surface during unusually clear conditions. They described walls, roads, buildings, the remains of cities that the lake had swallowed. These accounts were dismissed by colonial authorities and early modern researchers as folk legends, conflations of above-water ruins with imagined underwater counterparts. The lake was too deep, they said. The claims were too extraordinary. Then came Jacques Cousteau. In 1966, the legendary oceanographer arrived at Lake Titicaca with a team of divers and a small submarine, determined to investigate the persistent legends. What he found surprised even him. At depths of up to 20 meters, Cousteau's expedition documented stone structures that were unmistakably artificial. Walls following straight lines, what appeared to be pathways, the remnants of buildings arranged in patterns that could only be deliberate. The conditions were challenging. The altitude affected diving physiology, requiring modified decompression procedures. The water temperature hovered around 10 degrees Celsius. Visibility was limited by suspended sediments. But the evidence was undeniable. Something had been built in what was now the bottom of the lake. The local legends had been telling the truth. Cousteau's expedition generated worldwide attention, but raised more questions than it answered. The technology of the 1960s limited what could be documented and analyzed. The expedition was brief, the findings preliminary. For decades after, the underwater ruins of Lake Titicaca remained more tantalizing possibility than established fact. That changed definitively in 2000, when an Italian scientific expedition called Archaeology Geographical Exploring mounted a comprehensive underwater investigation. Over 18 days, the team conducted more than 200 dives in the waters near the Isla del Sol, systematically documenting what they encountered with modern cameras, measuring equipment, and positioning technology. What emerged from the darkness transformed our understanding of the region's prehistory. To understand why the underwater ruins are so significant, we must first reconstruct the ancient environment of Lake Titicaca. The lake has not always been its current size. During the last ice age, when glaciers locked up much of Earth's water, Titicaca was significantly smaller and shallower. The climate was different, colder and drier, with lower lake levels exposing land that now lies submerged. As the ice age ended and glaciers melted, water levels rose. This was not a gradual process but occurred in phases, with periods of relative stability punctuated by significant increases. Geological evidence suggests that the lake reached approximately its current level sometime between 1500 BC and 500 BC. Any structures built on the ancient shoreline before this period would have been progressively inundated as waters rose. This is precisely what the underwater ruins suggest. Construction during a period when the lake was much lower, followed by submersion as climate changed and waters rose. The implications for regional chronology are profound. If the underwater structures predate the lake's rise, they would be among the oldest sophisticated stone constructions in the Americas, possibly predating the civilizations we know by thousands of years. The Archaeology expedition documented an extensive underwater complex covering approximately 50 hectares. The divers found walls constructed from massive stone blocks similar to those used at Tiwanaku. They photographed roads or pathways extending for hundreds of meters along the ancient lakebed. They discovered what appeared to be a temple complex with distinctive architectural features. They recovered artifacts including pottery fragments, ritual objects, and items that appeared to be gold. The discovery that generated the most excitement was a raised road or causeway running through the submerged complex. This feature extended for approximately 800 meters, connecting various structures. Its construction suggested sophisticated planning and significant labor investment, not the work of a simple fishing community, but of an organized society capable of monumental projects. Carbon dating of organic materials found in association with the structures yielded dates ranging from 1000 BCE to 500 CE, a span of 1500 years. But these dates likely reflect the long period of use, rather than the initial construction. The stone foundations themselves appeared to be older, potentially much older, than the datable organic materials. Analysis of the architectural style revealed both similarities to and differences from known Tiwanaku construction. Some features matched the techniques seen at the mainland site, the size and finishing of blocks, certain construction methods, apparent architectural purposes. But other features were distinctive, suggesting either a different culture or an earlier phase of development that later influenced the Tiwanaku. The scientific investigation continues to this day, though funding limitations and logistical challenges have slowed progress. Underwater archaeology is expensive and technically demanding under any circumstances. At high altitude, with cold water and limited visibility, the challenges multiply. Each dive yields new data, but comprehensive understanding remains elusive. One particularly intriguing finding concerns the apparent ritualistic nature of many underwater features. Certain structures show evidence of deliberate offerings, objects apparently placed rather than accidentally dropped, arranged in patterns that suggest ceremonial purpose. This is consistent with the long-standing sacred significance of Lake Titicaca in regional traditions. The lake was not merely a resource, but a spiritual center, a place where the boundaries between worlds grew thin. The academic debate over the underwater ruins remains active and occasionally contentious. Mainstream archaeologists generally accept that artificial structures exist beneath the lake, but disagree about their age, cultural affiliation, and significance. Conservative interpretations link the ruins to known cultures, Tiwanaku or their predecessors, and emphasize the difficulties of precise dating in underwater contexts. More radical interpretations suggest that the ruins represent evidence of a much older civilization, possibly the legendary origin culture that influenced later developments throughout the Andes. This interpretation is attractive to those who see evidence of sophisticated ancient achievements that challenge conventional timelines, but it remains controversial within academic circles. What no one disputes is that something significant lies beneath Lake Titicaca, structures that were built on dry land and subsequently drowned by rising waters. The simple existence of these ruins extends our timeline of occupation in the region further back than previously documented surface evidence suggested. The Aymara and Quechua communities who live around Lake Titicaca have their own understanding of what lies beneath the waters. Their oral traditions speak explicitly of flooded cities, of a time before the current age when great civilizations flourished on the shores of a smaller lake. A catastrophic flood, punishment for human transgression, according to some versions, drowned these cities and their inhabitants. The survivors emerged to repopulate the world, becoming the ancestors of later peoples. I find these traditions increasingly credible as evidence accumulates. Time and again, indigenous oral histories preserve memories of events that science later confirms. The geological record shows exactly the kind of lake-level rise that the traditions describe. The underwater ruins show exactly the kind of drowned settlements that oral history maintains existed. Perhaps our ancestors were not inventing myths, but preserving history. The relationship between indigenous communities and the underwater sites is complex. The lake itself remains central to Aymara's spiritual life, with ceremonies conducted on its shores and islands that acknowledge powers residing in its depths. The underwater ruins are not tourist attractions to these communities, but sacred places requiring respect and appropriate behavior. Experiencing Lake Titicaca today requires little specialized preparation. The lake is accessible by road from La Paz and Cusco, with tourist infrastructure developed around the main towns and islands. Boat tours to the islands are common, and the clarity of the water sometimes allows glimpses of what lies below, though the major ruins are too deep for casual observation. For those who wish to see the underwater structures directly, specialized diving operations exist, though they require experience and proper certification. The altitude makes standard recreational diving procedures inadequate. Modified tables and extended safety stops are necessary. The water is cold, requiring appropriate exposure protection, and visibility varies enormously with conditions. But even without diving, the lake casts its spell. Standing on the shore at dawn, watching mist rise from waters that have witnessed thousands of years of human history, you feel the weight of time. Somewhere beneath the surface, stones wait in darkness, stones that human hands shaped, that human labor moved, that human hopes and fears invested with meaning. They have waited for millennia. They will continue waiting. What strikes me most about Lake Titicaca's underwater ruins is what they imply about historical contingency. We know about the civilizations we know because their remains happened to survive where we could find them. How many others flourished and vanished without leaving accessible traces? How much of human history lies beneath rising waters, beneath accumulated sediments, beneath the accidents of preservation that determine what endures? The drowned temples of Titicaca remind us that our picture of the past is necessarily incomplete. We see what survived. We miss what did not. And every discovery of something previously unknown, like the underwater ruins, should prompt humility about how much we might still be missing. The lake keeps its counsel. It has outlasted the builders of the underwater temples, the Tiwanaku, the Inca, and the Spanish Empire. It will outlast us, and the stones in its depths will continue waiting, patient and silent, for someone to finally understand what they represent. Leave the cold Altiplano behind. We are traveling east now, descending from the high Andes into a different world entirely. The landscape transforms dramatically as elevation drops, sparse grassland giving way to cloud forest, then to subtropical valleys where the air grows thick and warm with moisture. Orchids cling to tree trunks. Birds flash between branches in colors that seem too vivid to be real. This is the eastern frontier of ancient Bolivia, where Andean highland cultures met the vast lowland civilizations of the Amazon basin. And here, rising above a valley floor, stands something that should not exist. The sandstone ridge announces itself from miles away. It juts from surrounding terrain like the spine of some buried giant reddish stone thrust upward against the green of enclosing forest. The shape seems natural from a distance, just another geological formation in a landscape full of them. But as you approach, something changes. The surface is wrong. Lines appear that have no business in natural rock. Shapes emerge that geometry does not explain. The mountain itself has been transformed. El Fuerte de Samaipata, the fortress of Samaipata, sits in the Santa Cruz department of eastern Bolivia, approximately 120 kilometers from the city of Santa Cruz de la Sierra. UNESCO designated it a World Heritage Site in 1998, recognizing both its cultural significance and its profound mystery. The carved section of the rock extends approximately 220 meters in length and 60 meters in width. Every surface within this area has been worked, shaped, transformed into something that defies easy categorization. The name fortress is a Spanish invention that reflects more about the conquistadors' worldview than about the site's actual purpose. When the Spanish encountered Samaipata in the 16th century, they defaulted to military interpretation. If something impressive was built, it must have been for defense. But even the earliest European observers recognized that the carved mountain fit no model of fortification they knew. The carvings served purposes they could not identify. The shapes communicated meanings they could not read. More troubling still, the indigenous peoples of the region could not fully explain the site either. By the time the Spanish arrived, Samaipata had already been abandoned. The local populations knew it as a sacred place, but attributed its creation to ancestors so ancient that specific knowledge had been lost. It was a place of power. It was significant beyond question. But what exactly it meant, no one could say. The first systematic study of Samaipata began in the early 20th century, when archaeologists started documenting the extent and nature of the carvings. What they found was overwhelming in scope and enigmatic in meaning. The entire upper surface of the ridge had been carved, shaped, transformed into a three-dimensional composition of features whose purpose remains debated. Archaeological evidence indicates that Samaipata was used by multiple cultures over a span of at least 1,700 years. The earliest confirmed human activity at the site dates to approximately 300 CE, associated with the Mojocoya culture, a pre-Inca people who inhabited the eastern Bolivian lowlands. Later, the Chans people occupied the region, followed by the Inca, who incorporated Samaipata into their empire in the 15th century and added their own constructions. But here is what troubles researchers. The primary carving of the rock itself appears to predate all these documented cultures. The scale of the project, the depth of the carvings, the erosion patterns visible on the stone, all suggest an antiquity that extends beyond our archaeological timeline. Someone began shaping this mountain before the Mojocoya arrived. Who they were and what they intended remains unknown. The environment around Samaipata during its early use would have differed significantly from today. The region lies in a transitional zone between Andean highlands and Amazonian lowlands, a corridor through which trade goods, ideas, and people flowed for millennia. The climate was likely somewhat drier in the distant past, with forest cover less dense than at present. The sandstone ridge would have been more visible, more prominent against the landscape, a natural landmark that someone chose to transform into something supernatural. Why here? the location is significant. Samaipata sits on the main route connecting the highland civilizations of the Andes with the lowland cultures of the Amazon basin. Whoever controlled this corridor controlled trade between two worlds. The carved mountain may have served as a marker, a statement of power, a ritual center where the energies of two ecosystems merged. But these interpretations remain speculative. Let me describe what you actually encounter when you stand upon the carved rock of Samaipata, because nothing quite prepares you for the reality. The first features you notice are the parallel channels that run along much of the rock's length. These channels are too straight to be natural erosion, too precisely cut to be accidental. They run in roughly parallel lines, their sides vertical, their bottoms flat. Some are narrow, perhaps a foot wide. Others are broader. They appear designed to hold or direct liquid of some kind, though what liquid and for what purpose remains debated. Scattered across the rock surface are seats, carved benches of various sizes, some large enough for a single person, others that could accommodate groups. These seats are not random, but appear oriented toward specific features or directions. Some face the parallel channels, others face the horizon at points that may correspond to astronomical alignments. Sitting in these carved seats, you become part of an ancient audience. But for what performance? Circular depressions dot the rock at various points. Some are shallow basins, perhaps for holding offerings. Others are deep holes that penetrate several feet into the sandstone. The purpose of these features is unknown. They may have held poles or other structures that left no surviving trace. They may have been ritual vessels. They may have served functions we cannot imagine. Near the rock's western end, a massive rectangular pool dominates the composition. This feature is surrounded by carved channels that appear designed to direct liquid into it. The pool itself is too large for practical water storage in this location, suggesting ritual rather than utilitarian purpose. Carved figures nearby appear to represent felines, jaguars most likely, given the regional fauna. This area is sometimes called the Temple of the Felines, though temple implies more understanding than we actually possess. One feature that has generated particular attention is what appears to be a carved serpent, its body winding across the rock surface for a considerable distance. The serpent form is consistent with symbolic traditions found throughout the ancient Americas, where snakes represented water, fertility, and the boundary between worlds. But whether this represents a serpent or some other sinuous form, perhaps a river, perhaps an abstract pattern, remains debated. Modern analysis of Samaipata has revealed astronomical alignments that suggest sophisticated sky observation. The parallel channels, when viewed from certain positions, frame the horizon in ways that would have allowed precise tracking of solar movements. Specific features appear oriented towards solstice sunrise or sunset points. Other alignments may relate to stellar events, the rising of the Pleiades, for example, which was significant throughout ancient South America. This astronomical dimension complicates interpretation further. The Mojacoya culture, which represents the earliest confirmed occupation, left no other evidence of sophisticated astronomical knowledge. If the rock was already carved when they arrived, they inherited a monument they may not have fully understood, using it for purposes perhaps different from those intended by its creators. Attempts to date the carving itself have proven frustrating. Sandstone cannot be directly dated by standard methods. The rock surface has eroded over millennia, obscuring evidence of original cutting techniques. What remains are indirect indicators: erosion rates, occupation levels, comparative analysis that suggest great antiquity without providing precise dates. The competing theories about Samaipata's purpose reflect scholarly uncertainty. Some researchers emphasize the astronomical alignments, interpreting the site as an observatory or calendar marker. The carved channels, in this reading, served as sighting lines for tracking celestial events. The seats positioned viewers for systematic sky observation. Other researchers emphasize the ritual features, the pools, the feline carvings, the apparent provisions for liquid offerings. In this interpretation, Samaipata was a ceremonial center where shamans conducted rites involving water, blood, or chicha, mourndera. The carved surfaces directed sacred liquids and patterns charged with symbolic meaning. A third perspective emphasizes the political dimension. Located on a major trade route between highland and lowland cultures, Samaipata may have served as a boundary marker, a symbol of territorial control, a place where meetings and exchanges occurred between otherwise separate peoples. The carvings demonstrated power and legitimacy. The astronomical alignments confirmed connection to cosmic order. Most likely, all these interpretations capture partial truths. Ancient sacred sites typically served multiple purposes simultaneously: astronomical, ritual, political, social, in ways that modern compartmentalized thinking struggles to grasp. Samaipata was probably all these things at once, a place where different meanings layered and reinforced each other. The indigenous communities of the region maintain their own traditions about the carved mountain. The Guerin people, whose ancestors inhabited the eastern lowlands, speak of Samaipata as a place of power, built by those who came before. Some traditions associate the site with supernatural beings who descended from the sky. Others emphasize the mountain's role as a threshold between worlds, between highlands and lowlands, between the living and the dead, between ordinary reality and the realm of spirits. I want to treat these traditions with respect, rather than dismissing them as superstition. The people who have lived in this region for centuries possess knowledge that outsiders lack. Their oral traditions may preserve truths that our analytical methods cannot access. When they describe Samaipata as a place where boundaries grow thin, they are recognizing something about the site that scientific categories struggle to capture. Visiting Samaipata today is relatively straightforward. Paved roads connect the site to Santa Cruz de la Sierra, and tourism infrastructure has developed around the nearby town. The carved rock itself is now protected, with designated pathways that allow viewing without damaging the ancient surfaces. An adjacent museum displays artifacts recovered from excavations and provides context for what you are about to see. Even from designated viewing areas, the scale overwhelms. You can trace the parallel channels with your eyes, spot the carved seats, identify the pool complex and its surrounding features. The overall pattern becomes visible: how different elements relate to each other, how sightlines connect across the rock surface. But the meaning remains elusive. You are looking at text in a language you cannot read. The best times to visit are early morning or late afternoon, when angled light reveals features that disappear under direct sun. Shadows give depth to carved surfaces. Channels seem to glow when sunlight catches them at certain angles. The rock comes alive in ways that feel intentional, as if the original builders understood exactly how light would interact with their creation across all seasons and times of day. After everything I have learned about Samaipata, I believe we are looking at something far older and more significant than our current frameworks can accommodate. The carving predates our documented cultures. The astronomical sophistication exceeds our expectations. The scale of ambition, transforming an entire mountain into a shaped monument, suggests motivations we cannot adequately explain. Someone stood here thousands of years ago and conceived a project that would require generations to complete. They developed techniques for cutting sandstone on a massive scale. They organized labor forces capable of sustained effort over decades or centuries. They encoded astronomical knowledge into rock that would endure millennia. And then, they vanished. Their identity remains unknown. Their language is lost. Their descendants, if any survive, have forgotten the specific meanings their ancestors carved into stone. What remains is the mountain itself, still standing, still offering its puzzle to anyone willing to engage. The carved surfaces continue to erode, slowly, inevitably. Each year, details grow slightly softer. but the questions remain as sharp as ever. We return now to where our journey began, the heartland of Andean mystery, where the Altiplano meets the sky and the ruins of an impossible civilization spread across the ancient landscape. Tiwanaku sits on the southern shore of Lake Titicaca, its remains covering nearly 4 square kilometers of the Bolivian high plateau. For nearly 1,000 years, this was the capital of an empire that stretched from Peru to Chile to Argentina, the spiritual and political center of a civilization that accomplished things we still struggle to explain. And at its heart, sunk beneath ground level, waits a temple that has never fully surrendered its secrets. The approach to Tiwanaku takes you across country that seems empty of human significance. The Altiplano stretches flat and featureless, broken only by distant mountains and the occasional village. The thin air at nearly 13,000 feet gives everything a sharp-edged clarity, colors more vivid than they should be, distances deceptively compressed. Nothing suggests that you are approaching one of the most important archaeological sites in the Americas. Then, the ruins emerge, stone blocks scattered across the landscape, walls that once enclosed vast ceremonial spaces, monuments that still stand against the sky. The scale becomes apparent slowly, as your eye learns to distinguish ancient masonry from natural rock, as patterns emerge from apparent chaos. Tiwanaku was enormous. Even in ruin, it commands. The semi-subterranean temple sits at the eastern edge of the ceremonial core, adjacent to the massive Kalasasaya platform. You approach along a path that ancient visitors would recognize, passing monuments that have watched this route for millennia. The temple itself is invisible until you are nearly upon it. Its sunken design means the walls do not rise above ground level. You reach the edge, look down, and suddenly you are being watched. More than 170 carved stone faces line the temple walls, staring outward from the sunken space. They emerge from fitted stone blocks at various heights and intervals, some at eye level, some near the ground, some high enough that you must tilt your head back to see them. Their expressions range from serene to fierce, peaceful to disturbing. Their styles vary, some naturalistic, some abstract, some representing features that might be human, might be something else entirely. The effect is profoundly unsettling. You descend the stone stairway into the sunken court, and the faces surround you. There is no position in the temple where you are not observed. Whatever ceremonies took place here, they occurred under constant surveillance, watched by presences that have never explained themselves. The semi-subterranean temple was formally excavated in 1932 by Wendell Bennett, an American archaeologist whose work at Tiwanaku fundamentally shaped our understanding of the site. Bennett found the temple remarkably well preserved, its walls standing, its carved heads still in place despite centuries of abandonment and exposure. At the temple's center, Bennett discovered something extraordinary: a massive stone monument that had been deliberately buried at some unknown point in the past. This sculpture, now known as the Bennett Stele or the Pachamama monolith, stands over 7 meters tall and weighs approximately 20 metric tons. It depicts a human figure holding ritual objects, its surface covered with intricate carvings that likely represented cosmological concepts, calendar systems, or religious symbolism. Why was this monument buried? The Tiwanaku invested enormous effort in creating it, quarrying, transporting, and carving 20 tons of andesite into detailed sculptural form. Then, for reasons unknown, they concealed their creation beneath the floor of the temple. No satisfactory explanation has been proposed. The world in which the semi-subterranean temple was built differed significantly from the present. Dating evidence places construction around 200 CE, making it one of the earlier monumental works at Tiwanaku. The civilization was still ascending toward its peak, which would come several centuries later. But already the builders possessed sophisticated skills in stoneworking, astronomical observation, and large-scale construction. The climate around 200 C was more favorable than today, wetter, with Lake Titicaca larger and more productive. Agricultural surplus supported a growing population and allowed the diversion of labor to non-productive activities like temple construction. The Tiwanaku were developing the social organization that would eventually allow them to dominate the Central Andes. But they were also developing something less tangible: a worldview, a cosmology, a way of understanding the relationship between humans, earth, and sky. The semi-subterranean temple represents an architectural expression of that worldview. Its sunken design was not merely practical, but cosmological. To enter the temple was to descend, to leave the ordinary world, to approach something below. The carved faces that line the temple walls have generated extensive scholarly debate. The conventional archaeological interpretation describes them as representations of conquered peoples, trophy heads, essentially, displaying Tiwanaku's power over enemies. There is some evidence for this. Certain faces display features distinct from the local population, suggesting foreign origin. The practice of displaying enemy heads was common in ancient Andean cultures. But this explanation has always seemed incomplete to me. The faces are too varied in style, too numerous, too carefully integrated into the temple design to be mere trophies. Some appear serene, even benevolent, not the expressions you would carve for humiliated enemies. Others show features that seem non-human: exaggerated eyes, unusual proportions, geometric stylizations that transform faces into something other than portraits. I believe the faces represent something more complex than conquest. Perhaps they depict ancestors, beings who once lived and now exist in another state. Perhaps they represent spirits of the land, forces that the Tiwanaku believed inhabited the physical world. Perhaps they show beings from other realms, entities encountered in visionary states induced by the psychoactive substances we know the Tiwanaku used. Whatever they represent, their purpose seems clear: to watch. The semi-subterranean temple was a space of surveillance, where nothing that happened went unobserved. Every ceremony, every offering, every word spoken within those sunken walls occurred under the gaze of 170 stone witnesses. This was not accidental, but essential to the temple's function. Modern analysis has revealed sophisticated construction techniques invisible to casual observation. The walls are built using a method sometimes called keystone or clamp construction, where metal brackets originally held stone blocks together. Chemical analysis of surviving metal residues shows these clamps were made from a bronze alloy, specifically a copper arsenic bronze with distinctive properties. The precision of this metallurgical work is remarkable. The clamps were cast by pouring molten metal into carved stone channels, requiring careful temperature control and consistent alloy composition. The technique appears throughout Tiwanaku construction, suggesting standardized methods and specialized knowledge. But here is what puzzles researchers: no foundry waste, no failed castings, no evidence of metallurgical experimentation has been found at Tiwanaku. The bronze work appears fully developed, as if the technique arrived complete rather than developing through trial and error. Where did this knowledge come from? How was it transmitted? These questions remain unanswered. The orientation of the semi-subterranean temple is astronomically significant. Its walls align with cardinal directions. Certain features appear designed to mark solstices, equinoxes, or other celestial events. When you stand at specific positions within the temple, sightlines to the horizon correspond to significant astronomical moments. This integration of astronomical observation into sacred architecture is characteristic of Tiwanaku. The nearby Kalasasaya platform includes alignment stones that function as a precise solar calendar. The overall design of the ceremonial core seems to map celestial phenomena onto terrestrial space, creating correspondences between what happens in the sky and what happens below. The academic debate over the semi-subterranean temple centers on questions of function and meaning. What happened here? Rituals, clearly. But rituals of what kind? The presence of the buried stele suggests something about concealment, about hidden powers, about things that must be kept from ordinary sight. The carved faces suggest observation, judgment, the presence of witnesses from another order of being. Some researchers emphasize political function, seeing the temple as a space where Tiwanaku rulers demonstrated their special relationship with cosmic powers. The descent into the sunken space, the surrounded by watching faces, the proximity to the great buried monument, all of this would have emphasized the ruler's unique status as mediator between worlds. Others emphasize initiatory function, seeing the temple as a space of transformation. To enter was to die symbolically. To emerge was to be reborn with new knowledge or status. The watching faces witnessed the transformation, perhaps judging worthiness, perhaps protecting the process from interference. A third perspective emphasizes the temple's role in communicating with the dead. The sunken design suggests a journey toward the underworld. The faces might represent ancestors who must be honored, consulted, or appeased. The buried stele might embody powers too dangerous for ordinary interaction, requiring concealment most of the time. The Aymara communities who live near Tiwanaku maintain their own traditions about the sunken temple. They describe it as a place of power, a threshold between worlds, a location where the boundaries that normally separate the living from the dead, the human from the divine, the visible from the invisible, grow thin. Their oral histories speak of the temple as a place of transformation, where those who entered underwent profound changes. Some traditions describe it as the navel of the world, the point from which creation spread outward. Others associate it with the ancestors who built Tiwanaku, beings whose power and knowledge exceeded that of ordinary humans. I want to honor these perspectives without romanticizing them. The Aymara are not a unified group with a single tradition. Their beliefs have evolved over centuries, incorporating influences from Tiwanaku, Inca, Spanish colonial, and modern sources. But at their core, these traditions preserve a recognition that seems important. The semi-subterranean temple was a place where ordinary reality gave way to something else. Visiting the temple today is a moving experience. The site is open to tourists, accessible by road from La Paz. You can descend the stone steps into the sunken space, stand where ancient visitors stood, feel the weight of 170 gazes falling upon you from the walls. The temple is smaller than you expect, intimate, enclosed, designed for experiences rather than crowds. The carved faces vary enormously in style and expression, rewarding careful attention. Some seem almost friendly. Others appear hostile or indifferent. A few are so abstract that their humanity is uncertain. The best time to visit is early morning, before other tourists arrive, when the light is soft and the silence allows you to feel the space as its builders intended. The sensation of being watched is profound and not entirely comfortable. Whatever this place was, it was not meant to be comfortable. What strikes me most about the semi-subterranean temple is its patience. For nearly 2,000 years, the carved faces have watched everyone who entered. They watched the Tiwanaku perform their ceremonies. They watched the civilization collapse and the temple fall into ruin. They watched the Spanish arrive with their questions. They watched archaeologists excavate and tourists photograph. They watched still, waiting for something that may never come, or perhaps watching over something they will never cease to guard. The questions raised by the temple are not the kind that admit of final answers. Why was the stele buried? What do the faces represent? What happened in this space that required such elaborate construction, such careful orientation, such permanent surveillance? We do not know. We may never know. And perhaps that is part of the point. Some mysteries are meant to remain mysteries. Some questions are asked not to receive answers, but to change the asker. The semi-subterranean temple has been changing those who enter it for nearly 2,000 years. It continues that work today. The faces watch, the silence waits, and the questions echo off walls that have never offered explanations. Bolivia has shown us something tonight that we cannot easily dismiss or explain away. Across 4 sites spanning hundreds of miles and thousands of years, we have encountered the same troubling pattern. Evidence of capabilities that exceed our explanations, achievements that challenge our timelines, mysteries that make confident answers impossible. At Puma Punku, precision cuts in volcanic rock speak of knowledge we cannot account for. In the depths of Lake Titicaca, drowned temples suggest civilizations older than our histories acknowledge. On the carved mountain of Samaipata, an unknown people transformed stone into something we still cannot fully interpret. And in the sunken temple of Tiwanaku, carved faces guard secrets they have never revealed, watching all who enter with patience that has outlasted empires. These are not the mysteries of distant stars or invisible particles. These are stones we can touch, structures we can measure, artifacts we can hold in our hands. The evidence is solid, physical, undeniable, and yet the explanations remain elusive. I have spent decades walking through ancient sites across this planet, speaking with researchers, studying evidence, trying to understand what our ancestors accomplished and how. I have learned to be skeptical of easy answers, of theories that explain too much too neatly. The past is complicated. Human capability is often surprising. Ancient people were not simple primitives waiting for modernity to enlighten them. They were us, curious and creative and ambitious, sometimes capable of things we have forgotten how to do. But even with all that experience, Bolivia unsettles me. The precision here is too precise. The scale is too grand. The questions are too fundamental. Something happened in this high, cold, remote corner of the world that does not fit comfortably into our narratives of human development. People accomplish things that our best theories struggle to explain, and when we ask how, the answers do not satisfy. I do not claim to know what the Tiwanaku knew. I am not proposing aliens or lost advanced civilizations or any of the other alternatives that fill certain corners of popular discourse. What I am proposing is humility. We do not fully understand what happened here. We may never fully understand, and that uncertainty itself is valuable. It keeps us honest, keeps us questioning, keeps us open to possibilities we have not yet considered. Perhaps future technologies will reveal what we cannot currently detect. Perhaps new excavations will uncover evidence that clarifies the picture. Perhaps some brilliant researcher will finally connect pieces that have remained separate, showing us what we missed. Or perhaps some mysteries are meant to remain mysteries. Perhaps the not knowing is itself the teaching. Perhaps Bolivia is reminding us that the past is larger than our understanding, that human history holds depths we have not yet fathomed, that humility is the appropriate response to evidence that exceeds our theories. The stones of Bolivia have waited thousands of years. They will wait longer still. The questions they raise are old, but they remain urgent. How did ancient people achieve what they achieved? What did they know that we have lost? What might we learn if we approach these mysteries with genuine openness rather than predetermined conclusions? The carved faces in the sunken temple are still watching. The drowned temples are still waiting in darkness beneath the cold waters of the sacred lake. The shattered precision of Puma Punku is still demanding explanation. And somewhere on a carved mountain in the eastern foothills, the stone still holds its secrets close. Bolivia keeps asking its questions. And we have not yet found the answers. Perhaps that is as it should be. Perhaps the questions themselves are more valuable than any answers we might invent. Perhaps the ancient builders knew something we are only beginning to suspect, that mystery is not a problem to be solved, but a gift to be received. The stones are patient. They can wait. And in their waiting, they invite us to patience as well, to slow down, to look carefully, to wonder without demanding resolution. This is what the past asks of us. This is what Bolivia offers to those willing to receive it. The mysteries remain, and so does our opportunity to encounter them with the humility and wonder they deserve.